I have been buying an excessive amount of books this summer, and my family is starting to notice.
You're kidding. What are we gonna do about this?
My guess is we need to throw away some of her books
That seems like a really drastic.
that she doesn't like anymore.
Isn't that really up to her?
Well, we need to do something.
What are you two talking about in here?
Mom?
What? So I figure I should probably tell you about all the new books that I have bought over the summer between Memorial Day and Labor Day, basically. Though I guess Labor Day is still a couple days away, so there's still time for me to add a couple to this pile, because I might be at the precipice, I'm on the verge of an involuntary book buying ban imposed by my family. I don't actually know how many are here. There's a lot. I'm gonna tally them as we go. I think I'm missing some. I think I don't have everything in this pile because, of course, I don't put them in one place. They live in piles around my condo. I don't even have a big bookshelf. They're currently just living in piles. All these books are from nonprofit publishers and independent presses and university presses, because that's what I am interested in and that's what I talk about here on this channel, though I do have a small exceptions pile to show you, to prove to you that it's not all I read. So we'll talk about those very briefly at the end. I'm going to tell you a little bit about how I first encountered each of these books, and then like a tiny little bit about each book, because you can go look up plot summaries and more information on your own time. I know you all know how to find out about books. So first up, we have The Long Run, a creative inquiry by Stacy Drasmo. I love collecting books about writing and the craft of writing and the writing life, and this fits right into that category. I found out about this book from my newsletter as I was writing my newsletter that I send out every month. I'll leave a link for the newsletter below so you can sign up if you're not signed up already. And in that newsletter, I share a big long list of books from nonprofit publishers and indie presses that caught my eye that were published the previous month. And this was in that newsletter, and then I wandered into my local bookstore and there it was. So I immediately picked it up because it had sounded so good. It's a series of interviews, I believe, where the author is exploring how to sustain creative pursuits and a creative life across one's lifetime, across decades of one's life, and how to keep up that excitement and inspiration across decades of your life. Holy hell. This is from Grey Wolf Press. The most important part of my channel is the name of the publisher. This is from Grey Wolf. They publish amazing books about writing, the writing life, and the craft of writing. This is from Coffee House Press. This is same story. I read about this as I was researching for my newsletter, and then saw it at my local bookstore in Chicago, my favorite bookstore, where I go probably a couple times a week over the summer. I've gone a lot, which is why I have all these books. It's Out of the Sierra, a story of Raramuri resistance by Victoria Blanco. And this is a nonfiction portrait of the Raramuri people of Mexico, told through the story of one family's displacement. And again, this is supposed to be fantastic. This was also purchased from my local bookstore. This is Fog and Car by Eugene Lim, a novel, and this is also from Coffee House Press. This I saw and hadn't read about for my newsletter yet, because I think they put it out on the table before the publication date, so I hadn't yet done my research compilation for my newsletter, and I saw it and I was like, this is a brand new book and I don't know about it, and so I bought it, and then was delighted to see a couple weeks later, when I was like pulling together information for my newsletter, this come up. So this is it's described as kind of a strange, unreal, surreal maybe, story of a recently divorced couple. The next several books, I'm missing a couple, but wait, they're somewhere around here. We'll get to them in a minute. These I picked up from New York Review Books sale. They had a big sale over the summer. Was it in the summer? Are these from the spring? I don't know. Who cares? I don't know. They had a sale at some point. So the thing with their sales, New York Review Books, they The more books you buy, the bigger your discount. So up to 4 books, you get 40% off your order. So obviously I bought more than 4 books. And that is why I have so many New York Review books, because I wait for their sales and then I buy a huge stack of books. But now, what's most exciting now about those sales is that New York Review Books is now the distributor for another small publisher called Dorothy, a publishing project. And I have a whole video about them. I want all of their books. And so I took advantage of the sale to make a little dent into that ultimate goal of having all their books. And these are 4. I bought 4. They're big about keeping their entire backlist in print at all times. So the first, and they only publish 2 books a year. Dorothy, we're talking about Dorothy. Their first 2 books that they ever published was Who Was Changed and Who Was Dead by Barbara Comins and Event Factory by Renee Gladman. So I picked those 2 up. Event Factory is the first in a trilogy, I believe, about an imagined city called Ravika. And this particular book in the trilogy is following a linguist traveler. This was a reprint of a book by Barbara Comins that had been long out of print. And my notes here say Willowweed family, English village, flood, and mysterious deaths. So that gives you an idea of what it's about. I also picked up, I want all the books, so it didn't really even matter which ones I bought. But the 2 I picked were The Wall Creeper by Nell Zink, and this is a weird and funny novel about an American family, an American couple who moved to Europe. And then these are the complete short stories of Leonora Carrington, who was a surrealist writer and painter. And then also from the NYRB sale, I got Augustus by John Williams. This is going to be my second John Williams book in my collection. No, I don't own Stoner, nor have I read Stoner yet, but that's on my list to acquire. But the other book that I own by John Williams is Butcher's Crossing, also from NYRB. This is Augustus, and it is a historical novel about the Roman Empire. And then I got My Death by Lisa Tuttle. This is the story of a writer who is recently widowed and has lost her muse, lost her inspiration, and she decides to write the biography of a famous writer or painter, or maybe both. And so she's interviewing this other writer, and strange things start to happen. So it's supposed to be strange and unsettling and amazing. This book I also picked up from my local bookstore. The story of me finding this book is I was in the bookstore with my son and his best friend, and the best friend's parents there was a festival going along the street, and they had gone to somewhere else in the festival, and I said I would hop into the bookstore with the 2 boys. And I can't go into a bookstore without buying a book. So I was scanning the bookshelves while the boys were each looking for a book to buy. I was looking for something from an indie press. The 2 boys quickly found what they wanted to buy, and were ready to go. And it's one thing dealing with the impatience of your own child in a situation like that. I can tell my own child, you need to wait, I'm still shopping, but I'm with someone else's child, I can't really do that. So I was in a rush trying to find a book, and I saw that my eye kind of glanced past this and it said Edith Wharton and Glimpses of the Moon, and then I saw that this is published by Pushkin Press, and I thought that's interesting, so I just grabbed it and bought it. And I have several other Edith Wharton books that are from Penguin that are on my list to read. I read her ghost stories maybe last year or the year before, and they were awesome. So I'm really looking forward to getting into more Edith Wharton, and this one's from Pushkin Press. This is a book about, high society New York, as one could imagine. Oh yes, so it's about the romantic misadventures of a couple who meet in New York high society, but they're actually penniless, and they decide to get married, and then they go to Europe, and they're gallivanting around Europe trying to find other people to marry, I think. Other rich people to marry. Yeah, I think that's what it's about. But classic Edith Wharton. I don't remember where I bought this. I got it from my local bookstore because that's what the bookmark is. This is Tenderloin by Joyce Sorman. It's translated from French by Lara Vergniaud. And this, I think I got from my local, I just said that. I did. I've started reading this, and I was going to read it for Women in Translation Month and started it in Women in Translation Month, which is August. This is about a butcher, a star butcher, a famous butcher who gets a little bit too obsessed with his job of butchering. I Who Have Never Known Men. This is published by Transit Books. This is Jacqueline Hartman, and it's translated by Roz Schwartz. This is a bit of a booktube darling recently, so I picked it up because I want to read it. It's supposed to be great. And this is about a group of women who live in an underground bunker or cage, and they have no memory of how they got there, and really very little concept of time. And then there's one young girl who lives there who's never been outside this underground cage. You all can tell me more about this book than I can tell you. One thing I like to do when I go into a bookstore is scan for independent publishers and nonprofit presses on the bookshelves and find 2 books. I like to leave a bookstore with 2 books. One, a book that I have had my eye on and knew about already. 2, I like to try to find a book that I haven't heard of yet. Luckily, that happened just the other day. We ended my son's summer vacation with a trip to Barnes & Noble. And just like we start summer vacation with a trip to Barnes & Noble for books for the summer, and we end summer vacation with a trip to Barnes & Noble. We went to a brand new Barnes & Noble, and they had a whole staff picks section for indie presses, which is awesome. And this was on there. I feel like maybe I've seen this, but I couldn't recall exactly. So this is Carnality by Lena Wolf, translated by Frank Perry. And this is from Other Press, and it's about a writer searching for inspiration who goes on a darkly comic and absurd journey through a hidden part of Spain. Another book that was on that indie press shelf at Barnes & Noble, super exciting, is one I did know about and have wanted to pick up recently. So this is Tell by Jonathan Buckley. This version is from New Directions, but this was the winner of the 2022 Novel Prize, which is a prize that is hosted by 3 publishers, one in the US, New Directions, one in the UK, Fitzcarraldo, and one in Australia, Garamundo. And so once they choose the winner of the prize, each of those publishers publishes that prize winner. And this year, which was I think the second year the prize has been around, there were 2 winners. And this was one of them. I want the other one, but they didn't have it at Barnes & Noble. So I will have to pick that up at some point. I actually have a wish list from bookshop.org. If you are interested in supporting this channel by buying and sending me a book, the other winner of the prize is on that wish list, and I'll leave a link for that below. But this is structured as a series of interviews with a gardener whose employer, who's an art collector and wealthy man, the gardener's employer has mysteriously disappeared. And this prize itself is supposed to be awarded to novels that help redefine what a novel can be. The Long Shining Waters. This is by Danielle Sosin, and this is published by Milkweed. This falls into the category of scanning a bookstore's shelves for books I haven't heard of. And I was at an amazing bookstore in Door County just a week ago called the Peninsula Bookman, and saw this. So this is a used copy, and it jumped out at me. It looked, since I was vacationing on the Great Lakes, although I also live on the Great Lakes, but this jumped out. This is a story of 3 women who live in 3 different centuries, and it tells of their lives lived on the shores of Lake Superior. Also from the Peninsula Bookman is The Volcano Lover, a Romance by Susan Sontag. So now there is a big story that goes behind why I'm including this here. So this was published by FSG. This is a first edition. I found it used at the Peninsula Bookman. This was published like a year or 2 before FSG was sold to a conglomerate. So FSG was a large independent publisher up until like 1994, and this was published in 1992, and this itself is the first edition. And Susan Sontag was a big influence on FSG throughout her career. I think she started publishing with them maybe in the 60s, and then was just a big influence on the kinds of writers that FSG was publishing, and in the way, like very literary writers, very experimental fiction, like Susan Sontag's work. And so I thought this was just a cool find based on my interest. This was one of the last years that FSG was independent, and it was the first edition from that time from a premier FSG writer, Susan Sontag. So for me, this was a super cool find. This actually takes place in the 1700s in Naples. I think it's supposed to be very experimental or unusual in form, but it's inspired by the lives of Sir William Hamilton, his wife Emma Hamilton, and Lord Nelson. And I just think the cover also is super cool, if you can see it. The other two New York Review books that I picked up, I want to finally dip my toes into the world of Magda Szabo. This is, oh my God, translated New York Review books. Who the hell is the translator? Translated by Len Ricks. Okay, and then must be the same because, oh yeah. Oh, see, this one says translated by. Oh, okay, because the introduction is from Allie Smith. They had to put that in the spot of the translator. Okay, well, whatever. So two books, The Door and The Fawn by Magda Szabo. My understanding is that a lot of her books are about complex relationships, especially between women who come from very different backgrounds, and a lot about betrayal and stuff like that in those relationships. So super excited. Every Kind of Wanting by Gina Frangello. I went to a reading from Gina Frangello and at my favorite bookstore, local bookstore, and they were selling her most recent novel, and so I picked it up. This is from Catapult. Yeah, this is from Catapult, and this is described as like Love Actually, but without the sentimentality. So that I love Love Actually, so that sounds great, because I don't like sentimentality in movies is great. Sentimentality in a book is not my favorite. So I love that description. So what I believe is it's telling kind of intersecting lives, like in multiple perspectives. Kind of you're getting switching stories, just like in Love Actually, I think is what they're getting at with that comparison. I have wanted to read Moon Tiger by Penelope Lively for a very long time. I had a writing instructor way back forever ago who always gave us a great list of recommended books, and Moon Tiger was always on there. I've been in several of her classes, and it's always been on. She always gives the list, and it's always on there. So this is the story of an elderly woman, a famous writer, who is reflecting and reflecting on her life and kind of fading in and out of memories from her life from a hospital bed. The Curators by Maggie Nye. This is a brand new book. This is from Northwestern University Press, I believe. I thought it was. Yeah, Northwestern University Press. This is another one that I learned about from writing my newsletter and then saw on the table at my local bookstore and had to buy it because it sounded so good. This is the story of a group of young girls in 1915 in Atlanta, I believe. Yes, Atlanta, 1915. They're obsessed with the trial and subsequent lynching of a Jewish man who was a superintendent of a factory who was accused of murder and then was later put on trial and then lynched. And these girls become obsessed with him, and they create, in their garden, they create a golem of this man, and it's supposed to be really good. Pedro Paramo by Juan Rufo. This is new translation by Douglas J. Weatherford. This is a classic of Mexican literature, and it's one of those things where you encounter something just in multiple places, like randomly, like all at the same time. It was referenced in a ton of different places. And so it was especially in a book I was reading called How to Draw a Novel, which I have another video about that that I'll link. Anyway, I was at a bookstore that's actually by my office, Barbara's Bookstore, which is inside of a hospital actually. And I was scanning the shelves like I do, and I saw Grove Press. This is published by Grove, which is an independent publisher. And I had just seen it mentioned so many times that I decided that it was time to pick up this masterpiece. Swallowing Mercury from Transit Books. This I ordered from Powell's. It had been on my radar for a while, and I have been wanting to read more Polish literature, and so this is by Violeta Gregg, translated by Eliza Marciniak, and it was longlisted for the Booker International, which is interesting because it's described as a memoir, but I thought that the Booker International was just for fiction. But it takes place, or it explores the author's youth in rural Poland in the 1980s. I forgot to tally. I was gonna tally them and I forgot. So if you've watched, I don't even know which videos I've mentioned this in, but a couple of them. One project I'm working on currently is to read several of the books of Nobel laureate Annie Ernaux and read them both in English. These are published by Seven Stories Press. We have The Years, we have Happening, and we have Simple Passion. And then also read those same books in French. So that is what I'm currently slowly working my way through. The Tree Doctor by Marie Mutsuki Mockett. This is published by Grey Wolf, and I picked this up because Sarah at Roadworthy had read it for our Grey in May month of Grey Wolf reading. And this is the story of a woman who is basically stranded from her family during the pandemic, and she's also trying to care for her elderly mother, but then she's separated from her because of the pandemic, and she proceeds to have an affair with the local tree expert from the nearby gardening center. It's good. I liked it. It was good. It also had really intense scenes of forest fires in the area. It takes place in, I want to say, Northern California. Yeah. Very, very, the most intense fire scenes I think I've ever read. I thought they were really well done, and it was terrifying. And I have family who live near fiery places. So yeah, I don't recommend it to you, family. Don't read it, but everyone else, you should. Water on Fire, a memoir of war by Tarek El Aris, and this is published by Other Press. So this is another example. I wrote about this in my newsletter, went to my bookstore, saw it on a table, and said, that sounded really good when I wrote about it, so I'm gonna buy it. And this is a memoir. It's supposed to be really amazing, that is about the multiple experiences in the author's life of displacement due to war. And it starts off in his childhood in Beirut. Winter in the Air and Other Stories by Sylvia Townsend Warner. This is published by Faber, and this I bought because I love Sylvia Townsend Warner. Thought it would be perfect to read in the winter, and I'm really excited. My favorite book that I've ever read from her is Kingdoms of Elfin, and that was published by Handheld Press, which is a UK publisher, and it's also short stories. So I thought this should be right up my alley. What Kingdom by Fine Grabel, translated from Danish by Martin Aitken. This is published by Archipelago, and this is supposed to be an amazing novel that is about a young woman who is living, it's her daily life in a psychiatric institution. I think she's struggling with depression, living with depression. I forget exactly what she has going on in her life, but it is supposed to be an amazing depiction of what life in a place like that is like. Yet again, an example of writing about something in my newsletter and then seeing it at the bookstore. This is About Uncle by Rebecca Giesler, translated by Jordan Stump, and this is published by Two Lines Press, which is dedicated to translated literature. So cool. And this is about a young woman who moves in to care for her ailing uncle, and I believe it gets really weird, like surreal weird. So it just sounded different. Another example of trying to find a book that I haven't heard of from an indie press or a nonprofit press and buying it at the bookstore. This is You Were Watching from the Sand, short stories by Juliana Lamy, and this is published by Red Hen Press, which I was really excited to find because I've been wanting to check Red Hen Press out for a while. I believe that some of these are like horror-esque, a little bit horror, a little bit not horror. I don't think they're all horror, but it sounded fantastic. And the blurbs are from Kevin Brockmeyer and Laura Vandenberg, which if you are familiar with their work, you can kind of see maybe where like the kind of weird style comes in, if this is at all similar to their weird work, which I love personally. So excited about that. It's the long list for the Carol Shields Prize for Fiction. I already have a whole video about this book, but I also picked this up when I picked up the other book by Gina Frangello at my bookstore when I went to her reading. This is all about Elena Ferrante's Neapolitan novels. I have a whole entire video about it. It's from the bookmarked series from IG Publishing. Critical Hits, Writers Playing Video Games, edited by J. Robert Lennon and Carmen Maria Machado. This is from Grey Wolf. This was published this year, I believe, or very recently, and it's just essays from writers who also play video games, and it really celebrates the art of the video game. And my husband loves to play video games, and I'm interested in him, so basically, and I'm interested in the things he's interested in, so I thought this would be a cool intersection of both of our interests. I don't know if he'll read it. I asked him if he would, and he said probably not. This I picked up from an adorable bookstore in Geneva, Illinois called Harvey's Tales, and this is When the Light of the World Was Subdued, Our Songs Came Through, a Norton anthology of Native Nations poetry edited by Joy Harjo. Again, I was scanning the shelves for independent publishers. Like I do, I wasn't aware of this anthology, but I picked it up, flipped through it, read some of the poems, and was immediately sold. Finally, from the nonprofit indie publisher section of the video, is the book I am currently reading and obsessed with. All that bit that I told you about Susan Sontag and FSG, it's from here. I learned it all from here. This is Big Fiction by Dan Sinekin, and the subtitle is How Conglomeration Changed the Publishing Industry and American Literature. And I am learning so much about the history of publishing in the United States from this book. It is chock full of lots of information, many names. It's hard to follow, but the last two chapters are about nonprofit publishing and independent presses, which was right up my alley. I'm almost done with it. I am learning so much. It's absolutely fantastic. And this is published by Columbia University Press. And before we go, I just want to show you that while the majority of books that I buy are from independent publishers, university presses, nonprofit publishers, it's not all I buy. So, I have a bunch here. I'm really into Wilkie Collins this summer, which is all because of BookTube, completely because of BookTube. Every person in my life I talk to about Wilkie Collins, they have no idea. They have no idea who I'm talking about. But you know who Wilkie Collins is, don't you? You do. Yep. Thank God you're here for me. I already read The Moonstone. I'm reading The Woman in White, and they're awesome. I also got The Beginning of Spring by Penelope Fitzgerald, Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. So excited to read that because I love Rebecca. And then this one is a big deal for me. You know what it is. James by Percival Everett. Percival Everett was long time published by Grey Wolf, which is a nonprofit publisher. Long time. There's actually an entire several sections about Percival Everett in this book, in Big Fiction, specifically about Percival Everett. So I'm actually reading this for a little project because this is not published by Grey Wolf. This is published, I don't even know, this is published by Doubleday, which is an imprint of somebody. Doubleday is an imprint of Penguin and Random House. So yeah, it's interesting when an author makes the transition from a nonprofit publisher to a publisher owned by a conglomerate. So there's just all sorts of interesting behind the scenes stuff that's, I'm not aware of that happens. But a lot of the big corporate publishers don't publish a lot of the same kind of writing that the nonprofit and indie presses are publishing. But Percival Everett has had so many novels and then has had success recently, specifically with The Trees, published by Grey Wolf, that it makes sense that he has transitioned over to a larger publisher. So that's just something that is really interesting to me, just that whole process. I want to read James and kind of think about that a little bit more. 44? Is that what you got? I don't know. 44. We're going to go with 44. Oh, it doesn't include In Ascension by Martin McGuinness, published by Grove, I think, because my husband has that one. He actually wants to read it. We found it at the bookstore, Barnes & Noble, last day of summer trip, picked it up, and I'm like, I've been wanting to read this. And I handed it to him, and I said, I think you, because he's not someone who has to leave a bookstore with a book. He often leaves without a book. I don't know how that's possible, but he hadn't found a book. I handed it to him, and I said, you might actually like this. And he read it, the premise, and said, I actually would like this. And so I bought it for him. So 45, that's 45. This does not count all of the books I bought for my kid, which is a lot. And then I also bought a bunch of cookbooks too, or a couple of cookbooks. But we're going to go with 45. 45, folks. 45 books that I bought this summer. No wonder my family wants to cut me off. It's one thing if you have a house and lots of bookshelves. I see people have book hauls of 45, 50 plus books all the time. People who go to used bookstores and buy all these books. So for one, the vast majority of these books are not from used bookstores. These are some of them bought on sale, but I spent a lot of money on books. Two, I don't have shelves. I don't have big bookshelves. You might be seeing a purchase of bookshelves in the near future. We might be doing that, and if we do, I will take you on that journey. Thank you for sticking with me. My name is Sarah. Thanks so much for joining me. I'll talk to you next time. Bye.